Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at how to create, read and update our orders. So basically we're going to take care of all the routes that are going to help us to place an order, get all orders, retrieve, update an order status and remove an order. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to start by creating the serializer that's going to help us to do this. So this serializer is going to be on our order model. So I'm going to close the authentication app and then go to the orders app. So I'm going to go to the orders app. Then within our orders app, I'm going to check out models.py. So our models.py basically has the different fields that we expect to get and use in our serializer. So what I'm going to do is to create a serializer. So I'm going to create a serializer file. So this is going to be serializers.py. So right after creating our serializers.py, we're going to first import our model. So I'm going to say from .models, we are going to import our order model. And the next thing I'm going to do is to also import serializers from Django Rest framework. So I'll say from Rest framework, we are going to import our serializers. After importing our serializers, the next thing we're going to do is to create our model serializer. So I'll create a class which I'm going to call the order. So I'm going to call this order creation serializer for now. So it's going to be our order creation serializer. So right now, what I'm going to do is to make this inherit from serializers.model serializer. So this is going to be model serializer. And after doing this, then the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and describe the different fields that you may need for this serializer. We need to create a class, and this is going to be our meta class. And the first thing we're going to define is the model we're going to use, which is going to be our order model. Now we're going to also describe the various fields that we're going to use in this serializer. So I'm going to copy our fields from models.py. So I'm going to copy the different fields. So I'm going to copy these fields and put them right here. So right now we have the customer field, but this is going to be a foreign key to our user table. So this is not something that we're going to describe on our own. We shall implement this in the view for placing an order. So what I'm going to do is to remove this. Now we have the one for size, and this is going to be a models.char field. So what we can do is to actually say this is going to be serializers. Char field, we can place in the max length, and what we can do is to actually remove the defaults and the choices. Now what we can do is to also put our order status. So the order status is a field that is only updated by the users or the admin users of our application. So what you can do is to make this a hidden serializer field, which can only be changed by super users. So what we're going to do is to change this to. So I'm going to change this to serializers dot, and we're going to call this a hidden field. So we're going to call this hidden field. And what we're going to do is to change this. So I'm going to come here and give it an order. So I'm going to come here, and what I'll do is to remove these choices. Now I'll leave it with the default. So the default here is going to be, so let's check in our models. So this is going to be pending. So I'm going to copy the choice for pending. And then that's what I'm going to place in our serializer. So the default is going to be pending. So basically going to put this within quotes to make it a string. And then for the quantity, this is going to be a serializer integer field. So we're going to say serializers, the integer field. Now these dates are automatically generated for us every time we carry out this. So what I'm going to do is to remove this, and because our database is going to basically store those every time we create an update. So what I'll do is to specify that here we're going to have our size, then also going to have our order, then we're also going to have, actually this is going to be our order status. So we're going to specify this is going to be our order status. And then what you can do is to also specify our quantity. So these are the fields the user is going to fill in when creating an order. Right after creating our serializer, we're going to go ahead and implement fields that are going to help us to So I actually have an error right here. This is going to be a serializer. Hoping that everything is fine, the server is running. So after doing this, then the next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and implement the different views that are going to help us to basically be able to create, read, and update our orders. So I'm going to go to myviews.py. So let's actually first see, it seems like we have an error somewhere here. Seems like everything is fine. So what I'm going to do is to go to our views.py. Now within our views.py, we're going to create the different views that are going to help us to create, read, and update orders. So what I'm going to do is to create this. So I'm going to use generic API view for this. So I'll create a class which I'm going to call the order creation. Actually, I'll call it the order create list view. This is because it's going to carry out two roles. It's going to help us to list our orders as well as to create our orders. So I'll come and say this is going to inherit from it's going to inherit from generics dot generic API view. So it's going to be view. So right after doing this, I'm going to go ahead and define the different methods. So the first method we're going to have is going to be our get. So I'm going to make this be get, and it's going to take itself and the request object. So we're going to pass this for now. Now we're also going to have one for creating an order. So I'm going to say it's going to be post, and then what we do is to go ahead and specify that this is going to take in the request object, and then we're also going to pass this for now. We're also going to create the ones for updating and deleting, and as well getting one order. So to do that, I'll create a class, and then I'll call this order detail. So I'm going to just call it order detail view, and then it's going to inherit from generics dot generic API view. So this is going to be generics dot generic API view. And right after doing this, then what we're going to do is to go ahead and also do the same. So I'll come and say it's going to be def, and the first method we're going to implement is going to be our get. So I'll put in the self, then the request, and then the order ID. So we shall need an order ID for now. So we're going to pass this for now. I also do the same thing for so in this case it's going to be put, which is going to be updating. So in this case we're going to have self and the request object. We're going to also have the order ID, so we're going to have the order ID as well. We're going to pass this for now. Now after passing this, we're also going to have our delete method. So we're going to specify that this is going to be delete, and we shall pass in self, the request object, as well as the order ID. Now after doing this, we're going to pass this for now. So the first ones we're going to take care of are going to be our order create list view. Our first view we're going to take care of is going to be our order create list view. So the first thing we're going to do is specify our serializer class. So remember, we've created our serializer in our serializer.py, which is going to help us to validate the data that we pass on to our API, as well as to make us to return JSON data to whoever is going to use our API. So what I'm going to do is to go right in here, and the first thing I'll specify is going to be a serializer class. So we're going to have our serializer as, so this is going to be equal to, so I'm going to import our serializers. So I'm going to say from dot import our serializers. Right after importing our serializers, I'm going to come and say that we're going to have our serializer class as serializers dot, in this case it's going to be our order. So I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to come copy order creation serializer. So I'm going to copy this. And when I go right here, what we're going to do is to basically add this. So the first thing we're going to do is to be able to return a list of our orders. So to do this, I'm going to come and say we're going to have our serializer. So I'm going to create a serializer instance. So this is going to be self.serializer class. And then it's going to take in the instance of the data that you want to return. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to query for all orders from our database. So I'm going to import our order model. So I'll come and say from dot models, we are going to import our order model. Right after doing that, I'm going to simply come right here and create a query. So this is going to return a query set of all orders. So I'll say orders is going to be equal to orders dot, this is going to be objects dot all. And right after doing this, I'm going to come right here, and what I'll do is to basically pass in the instance. So this is going to take in the instance for the order model. So in this case, we're going to have our instance as orders. Now we shall just have to return this in a response. So I'll say return response, and then what I'll specify first is the data that we want to return. So every time we add an instance to this serializer, we can access the data by getting serializer dot data, and then also we specify the status. So in this case, our status is going to be equal to in this case, what we want is to basically specify that our status is going to be let's say status dot http 200. Okay, now right after doing this, I'm going to save and hoping our server is running. So right here we have max length, so let's go ahead and see it. So I'll come right here in our serializers, max length, see serializers.char field, serializers.hidden field. So I'm going to remove this and I save. Actually, going to start our server. So I'm going to start our server again. In this case, it's working, which means we didn't need the max length attribute on our hidden field. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and basically access our admin, and we create some orders and then return a list of orders. So I'll go to localhost 8000. I'm going to click this with Control and click. So this is going to open up in my Chrome. So right now we see no page found. So when I go to slash, actually we needed to create a URL that's going to be able to help us to return our views. So I'm going to go to urls.py. So I'm going to create urls.py right in here. And then this urls.py, seems like we have it already. So I'm going to come right in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is specify the path and then the URL. So all of the order routes are going to be accessed on the slash orders prefix. So when I go to our documentation right here, we have we're going to be able to access it from slash orders. So when you go to our pizza project in our urls.py, we basically have all orders, all the order routes are specific to the slash orders prefix. So what I'm going to do is to come right in here and actually in our URLs also specify that this is going to be on our root URL. So I'm going to remove this. And right after removing that, then I'm going to specify the view. So in this case, it's going to be views dot our view, which is the order create list view. So I'm going to copy this. So this is going to be our order create list view, and then this is going to be a view. So I'll call it with as view. And right after doing that, I also give it a name. So I'll just specifically say orders, and when I save, hoping everything is fine. So right now we see path. So the structure is going to be path. So right now we have our development server running. So when you go to slash orders, what I'm going to do is to go to slash orders. So right here I'll have name orders. Actually made a mistake there. So this is going to be our order because we are querying from the order model. So hopefully everything is fine. So when you go right here and you refresh, you have attribute error when attempting to get the value size on order creation serializer. Okay, let's see. So when you go right here, you have size. Let's go to our model. We need to go to the order model right here. So we have size. So to fix this, what we're going to do is to go ahead and specify the many attributes. So since we are trying to return a query set, what we're going to do is to specify in our serializer, we're going to specify main is equal to true, because now we are returning a query set. So when I save, hopefully that everything is running well. So our server is reloading. So when I go right in here and I refresh, so we should either have a query set or a query set, get query set method. So I'll do is to come and specify our query set. So let's see, should either include a query set attribute or override the get query set method. So I'll do is to come and specify our query set. And in this case, it's going to be order dot objects dot all. So when I save this, our server is going to reload, and when I refresh, so actually this is supposed to be our query set. And right now we see our different orders returned to us. So we've been able to now take care of the order creation list. So let's go ahead and carry out our order placement or placing our orders. So the first thing we're going to do is to get access to the request data that a user may send to our API. So I'm going to access this with data is equal to request dot data. And now after getting this data, the next thing we're going to do is to use our serializer to validate this data. So I'm going to say serializer is going to be equal to self dot serializer class. So this is going to be our serializer class. And then right after doing that, then we're going to specify the data that we need to serialize. So this is going to be our data. And right after doing that, then we're going to check if our serializer is valid, and if it's valid, then we're going to go ahead and use it to save data to our database. So basically, we're using a model serializer, so it can help us to be able to save things to our database. So I'm going to check if our serializer is valid. So I'm going to say if serializer dot is valid. So in this case, we're going to check if it's valid. Then we're going to save. So I'm going to say it's going to be serializer dot save. And right after doing this, then what we shall do is to return a response. So I'll say return, and then this is going to be response, and we shall return. So the first thing we're going to do is to specify the data. So we're going to say data is going to be the serializer data, and then the status. So we're going to say serializer data, and then we're going to specify the status. So in this case, our status is going to be status. So we're going to have status dot, and we're going to specify this for every time we create a resource, we return 201. So it's going to be our 201 created. And then in case we have errors in our serializer, what we may want to return are the errors of the serializer. So we're going to say return, and this is going to be response. And then we're going to say that our data is going to be equal to serializer. So in this case, we have serializer dot. So we access the errors from the errors list, and then we can even return a status code. So in this case, our status code is going to be status dot http 400, and then this will be a badge request. So right after doing this, I'm going to save and hoping that our server is running. So we have no issues. So I'm going to go and access our order. So when I refresh this, right now we see that we even have a post. So we have a form that's going to help us create our order. So we may specify our size. So let's say one small, and then let's say we want our quantity as, let's say 3. So in a post, so right now we have no constraint. So in this case, we have no customer ID. So we are supposed to specify a customer in case we are basically placing an order. So an order is placed by a user. So you need some way of getting a user and then be able to attach them to the currently placed order. So to do that, I'm going to first close this. Now what we're going to do is to basically save this with our user. So I'm going to come and get access to the user. So in this case, when we say that our user, so we're going to get access to our user. So every time we are authenticated, we're going to be making use of, we're actually going to access our user through our request object. So what we shall do is come and say that our user is going to be request dot user. So right after getting request dot user, then you can attach the user to our serializer before saving it. So in this case, remember we have a relationship between the order and the user. So we have that as customer. So what we can do is to come and say that our customer is going to be equal to the user. So before we actually do this, what you want to do is to basically make sure that our user exists. So when I save this, what I'm going to do is to come right in here, and actually what I'll do is to come, let's first actually do that. So I'll say customer is going to be equal to our user. So when I save this, hoping that our server is running well, then what you're going to do is to come and refresh. So when I try to continue, right now we have an anonymous user. So this is because we don't have a user. So in this case, what we need to do is to actually go ahead and protect this route. So this route should be accessed by users who are basically logged in. So what you're going to do is to basically come and add permissions so that you only access this when we are authenticated. So what I'm going to do is to make use of permissions from Django Rest framework. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come and say from REST framework, I'm going to import permissions. So I'm going to say from REST framework dot. In this case, we're going to say dot permissions. We are going to import dot is authenticated. So right after doing that, then we can go ahead and specify the different permission classes on these different routes. So I'll come right in here in our order. Here in our order create list API view. So what I'll do is to specify our permission classes. So this is going to be a list of permission classes. And what we can do is to basically add a dot is authenticated. So this is going to be is authenticated. So when I save this, hoping that our server is running well. So what I'll do is to actually go ahead and refresh this. So right now we see that our authentication details were not provided. So this is basically taking us to our JWT authentication. So right now we cannot be able to do this, but what I'm going to do is to open up my Insomnia. So I'm going to come and open up my Insomnia. And we're going to use Insomnia to carry out this request of creating an order. So what we need to do is to first carry out our to get our JWT and then be able to include it within our authorization header and then be able to make a request based on that header. So right here in my Insomnia, I've created a simple collection, and right in here, I'm going to just go ahead and create a new request. So this is going to be one for creating a JWT. So we're going to actually access a JWT. And then this is going to be a post request. So we're going to need certain fields. And then I'm going to come and specify the body as JSON. So I'm going to come and create a JSON object right here. This JSON object is going to have an email, which in this case is going to be admin@app.com. And then what shall need is also the password. So I'm going to come and say password. So created that password as password 123. So when I'm going to specify the URL. So our URL is going to be localhost 8000 /auth/JWT and /create. So when I send this, we can be able to get our access token. So I'm going to copy our access token here, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a request for creating orders. So we can say create an order, or let's say place an order. So when we place an order, this is going to be a post request, and we're going to specify our body is going to be in JSON. So I'm going to create this, and then right here, what we need to specify is the size. So we're going to specify our size, and our size is going to be small. So we're also going to specify our quantity. So we're going to actually say that we need our quantity. So our quantity in this case, let's say, is going to be 3. So I'm going to provide the URL at localhost 8000, and then slash is going to be orders. So right here, the most important thing we need to specify is our authorization header. So you need to go to the header section right in here, and we need to provide our key as our authorization. And then I'm going to provide the value. So we specify that our header type is going to be bearer. So I'm going to come right here and say bearer, and then provide the token. So when I provide this token, I'm going to send. And right here, we see that our order has successfully been created. So what is happening is that when we provide our authorization header, the identity of the user who this token belongs to is hidden within our JWT. Every time we create an order, the identity is got from this token and then attached to the specific order that we are creating. So let's say if we got a list of orders, so I'm not going to be using the browsable API right now. We're going to look into how to enable the JWTs to be accessed on our front end when we deal with Swagger UI. So I need to come and list all orders, so we need to list all orders. So right here is going to be a GET request, and I'm going to create it. So it's going to be a localhost 8000 slash orders. So when I send this, right now we see that we also need authorization. So what I'm going to go is specify our authorization header, and I'm going to get the value of this. So in this case, we're going to have the value as bearer, then our token. So when I send this, we now see that we're having all our orders. So right now we've successfully worked on creating and retrieving our orders. So now what we need is to be able to access these different be able to access the browser and help us to update and delete our orders. So the first thing we're going to do is to implement one for getting a specific order by its ID. So I'm going to close this, I'm going to close our models, and I'm going to go in our views. So now we're going to take care of getting one specific order. So right here, the first thing we're going to do is first make a query that's going to return that order or that ID. So to do that, I'm going to come and say, so here, what we're going to do is first query for that specific order, that ID. So I'm going to say that our order is going to be equal to, so we're going to use a certain shortcut provided by Django, which is get object 0404. And what this is going to do is to search for the object, and if it does not exist, then we expect a status code of 404. So what I'm going to do is to import it. So I'm going to come here from Django.shortcuts. I'm going to get object, or so in this case we're going to have get object 0404. Then what we shall do is to come and say that this is going to be get object or 404. Then what we shall specify is the order or our model. So in this case, we're going to specify our model. It's going to be our order model. And then what we're going to actually provide here is going to be the attribute you want. So in this case, we want to get the primary key, and then you specify the value that you need to search for. So in this case, it's going to be our order ID. Now, right after doing this, we're also going to go ahead and basically return the instance. So we're going to say serializer is going to be called self.serializer class, and then we're going to specify our instance as, in this case, is going to be our order. Now, right after doing this, we're going to basically go ahead and return our response. So we're going to say return our response. And then here we shall come and say that our data is going to be for serializer dot data, and then we're going to also store our status as HTTP. It's going to be 200 and okay. So when we save this, hopefully the our server is running, so we don't have any issues. So I'm going to go ahead and basically return one order. So you need to come right here and create a new request, and then this is going to be get one order by ID. So I'm going to come here and create this. So when I create this, I'm going to go to localhost 8000 slash. So in this case, we're going to actually create our URL. So I'm going to come and say that the URLs are going to have. So in this case, it's going to be slash. So in this case, we're going to say that it's going to be slash order. And then we're going to actually get, what we need is the ID. So I'm going to come and say it's going to be our order ID. So I'm going to come and specify that we need an order ID. So actually it's going to be our order ID, which is going to be of type integer. Then every order, every time we access this, and we're going to be accessing the view of the order details. So I'm going to come and say views dot order details. So in this case, it's going to be our order detail. So we're going to copy this and place it in here. So it's going to be a view. So I'm going to come and specify that it's going to be as view. And I'll say the name is going to be equal to our order detail. So when I save this, I hope that our server is having no issues. So you don't have any issues. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and say it's going to be on our orders, and then slash, then we're going to specify the ID. So in this case, let's say we are getting the order with ID of 1. So when I send this, we have an error. So non-type object is not callable. So let's see what's happening here. So let's see here. Let's actually see. So we now this here, we have order type. So in this case, we're having the serializer class, which is going to be, so we haven't actually specified our serializer class. So I'm going to come right here. And in this case, what we want is to return all details of this specific order. So I'm going to go to our serializers, and then within here, I'm going to actually create the same class, but it's going to be our order details serializer. So it's basically going to return all the attributes of that specific serializer. So I'm going to come and copy this, and I'm going to paste this. Now there are some fields that you didn't add on here, but you're going to add them when basically returning all this. So I'm going to call this our order details serializer. And what is going to have? It's going to have the size, the order status, but in this case, the order status is not going to be a hidden key. So we're going to basically turn this into a car field. And then it's going to have, actually, let's just leave it like that. Then what you need is also the date. So I'm going to go to our models.py, copy that date. So we're basically going to have most of the fields here. Then I'm going to come and add them. So I'm going to go to our serializers.py and also add the created at, and so in this case we're going to have the created at and the updated at. So what I'll do is to basically remove this, also go ahead and remove this, and what I'm going to add here is going to be serializers.datetime field. So in this case we're going to have serializers datetime field. We're going to have that same thing for the updated. So we're going to have serializers date time field. So when I save this, our server is going to reload and hoping that everything is fine. I'm going to also add this. So I'm going to come and specify that we're going to have our created at. Also going to have our updated at. So this is going to be our updated at. So when I save this, our server is going to reload. We don't have issues. So what we need to do is basically go ahead and specify this. So I'll copy this order detail serializer and then add it to our view. So I'll come right in here and I'll say that our serializer class for this particular view is going to be our serializers dot in the order detail serializer. So when I save this, I'm going to go right here and try to carry out the same request. And in this case, we see HTTP 200. Okay, I made that stupid mistake. So this is going to be status dot HTTP 200. Okay. So right here, when I send this, in this case, we get the details of that specific order made. So right now, we'll be able to return this specific order. So let's go ahead and look at that one. It's going to help us to basically update an order. So the first thing we shall need is going to be the data. So we need to access the data via request dot data. And right after accessing the data, we're going to be able to check if our data is valid. So we're going to say our serializer is going to be our self.serializer class. And then right in here, what we need is to basically go ahead and specify the data that you want to serialize. So our data is going to be equal to data. And then if our serializer is valid, so we shall say serializer dot is valid. Then what we're going to do is to basically go ahead and save our data. So it's a serializer dot save. And right after saving this, we're going to return a status code of 200, showing that our update has been successful. So we're going to say return response. So we're going to return our response. And then the first thing we're going to specify is the data. So our data is going to be serializer data. And then we're also going to specify our status code. So our status is going to be status.http 200. Okay. And if we have an error, we're also going to do the same thing. So actually it's going to be status equals status the http 200. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to return our errors with a status code of 400. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and provide, so this is going to be serializers dot errors, because this is going to be a list of errors. We're also going to have our status code that's 400 and then add request. Okay, now after doing this, then let's go ahead and update our order. So I'm going to get the specific order that we access. So it's the order with the ID of 1. So I'm going to come right here, create a new request. This is going to be update. Update and order. So this is going to actually be a put request. So I'm going to specify that our body is going to be in JSON format and create it. So we're going to access this at localhost 8000 slash orders and then slash the ID of the order. So it's going to be 1. So remember, every time we're carrying out a post or output, we need to have the forward slash. So I'm going to come right here and specify our body. So I'm going to go to that getting our order by ID. So I'm going to copy this fields. And after copying these fields, I'm going to go and include them in our JSON. So updating that order with 1. So let's say I wanted to update a quantity. So let's say that quantity as 3. And then let's say want to basically say this is in transit. So in a send, so we have so now constraint. So we also have a now constraint field. So in this case, we have our order. So in this case, what we need is to actually specify the order. So let's go ahead and see our serializers. So one thing that we have actually failed to do here is to specify that we need to update this order. So this is going to be done by the request user, and we haven't yet specified the order, the request, the user who is actually updating this. So we're going to do that by coming right here. So we're going to come in our views, and what we're going to do is to access the request, the user who does this request. So our user is going to be equal to request dot user, but remember that this user is only accessed if this endpoint is basically protected. So what you shall need is to also add our permission classes. So I'm going to come right here and say need our permission classes, and this is going to be a list of permission classes. So we're going to just add is authenticated. And right after doing that, I'm going to save. And when I do that, so when you try to make this request again, we now see that we haven't yet provided our authentication credentials. So what I'm going to do is to get to our header section and then provide our authorization header. And then the value is going to be bearer. and then with the token, so I'm going to go where we get a token. So I need to copy the access token. Right after copying this access token, I'm going to go ahead and basically come to the update order and then copy the paste the access token right here. So when I send, right now we have an error. So basically you haven't specified the user who is carrying out this. So when they say our user is going to be request.user, then you can come and say that our user is going to be our customer, who is going to be our request.user, or let's say our user, because we have already written this user. So when I save this, I'm going to go here, and when I try to, so what I'm going to do is to basically send this again, and we have response not being defined, so it's actually response. Sorry for this stupid error. So when I send this, so our server is probably not running, so it has restarted. So when we try to send this again, we see that now our order has been updated. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is to basically deal with a view that's going to help us to delete our orders. So what I'm going to do is to first get that specific order. So in this case, you need to get the order by its ID. So our order is going to be equal to get object 00404. So in this case, we are just going to get the. Actually, here, one thing we've done as a mistake, I'm sorry for this. So what we need is the data that we're going to update. So I've actually done this as a post request. So what we need to do is to actually carry this out as a put request. So we need to make sure use of our order ID. So basically, we don't even need to have our user. So we need to repeat what we did for the put request. So I'm going to basically remove this code. I've done a mistake here. So what we need is the order to update. So I'm going to say order is going to be equal to. So it's going to be the same query as here. So I'm going to copy this, the query. So I'm going to copy this, and this is going to be the order. And then we need to create an instance. So I'm going to say serializer. It's going to be self dot, and in this case, it's going to be a serializer class. And then the first thing we need is the data. So the data we want to update with. So it's going to be data is equal to data. And then you also need the instance. So our instance is going to be that specific order we want to update. So in this case, our instance is going to be the order. Right after doing that, we check if it's valid, and if it's valid, we go ahead and save. So there's no need for us to have a user. So I'm going to say if serializer dot is valid, we are going to just go ahead and save this. So basically, we assume that our order already has what? Already has a user attached to it. So we're going to just say serializer dot save, and then we're going to return our response. I'm going to say return response. The data will be equal to serializer dot data, and then the status will be equal to status dot http 200, and then okay. So right after doing this, I'm going to just simply come right here, and I'm also going to return errors in case we have errors. So I'm just going to come and copy this. So I need to copy this line, and then I'm going to just simply return that in case you have serializer errors. So hoping that everything is fine, we're going to repeat this same. So right here, we're going to basically repeat this. So this doesn't even make it. So let's actually first comment this out. We don't need to have a user. So when you try to update this, couldn't connect to the server. Actually, we have an error here. So I'm going to do is to comment this and say pass. I save this. Our server is now running. So when I refresh and send this, so now we see that our order has been created and it's already attached to a user. All right. So now after doing this, then the next thing we want to do is to delete our order. So to delete an order, we're going to go ahead and basically get the instance of the order that we want to delete. So this is going to be the same thing. I'm going to get the order of it does not exist. So let's say we copy this, get the order, and if it does not exist, return 404 status code. So what we're going to do is to actually make sure that we delete this. So I'm just going to call order dot delete. Right after deleting this order, then what we need to do is to return our response. So I'm going to come and say return response, and then what we need is the status code. So it says status is going to be equal to status dot http, and the status code you return after deleting a resource is the 204 status code. So in this case, it's going to be 204, and we shall specify no content, meaning that we've deleted the resource and it does not exist. So when I save this, I'm going to go ahead and delete. So I'm going to come here and say it's going to be our delete and order. So this is going to be a delete request. I'm going to create it. So when I go to localhost 8000 slash orders slash the ID of the order I want to delete. So let's say I want to delete the order of, let's actually try to see. So if we say 10 and descend, in this case we see detail not found, and that's because of the get object of 404. But if we say 1, want to delete that of 1, so when we send this, we now see that our order has been deleted. So let's try to actually list all orders. So in list all orders, we forgot to actually specify the ID. So I make the ID field. So when I go right here in that order list serializer, I can actually add our ID. So add the ID. So I'm going to basically add our ID here. When I save this, copy that our server is now running. So each of our orders has an ID attached to it by our database. So we actually forgot to attach this to our list. So when I send this, we can now see the IDs, and the one with ID of 1 does not exist. So we've successfully been able to delete our orders. So let's go ahead and basically specify to actually delete. So right now we've taken care of the routes that get an order by its ID, update an order. So we need to get that one of updating an order status and getting a user's orders and getting a user specific order. So let's work on that. So I'm going to come right here, and in our views, I'm going to come and create a class. So our class is going to be update order status. So this is going to inherit from generics dot generic API view. Right after inheriting from that, we are going to create our method. So this is going to be our put method. Going to be our put method. So we're going to take in self, the request, and then the ID of the order that we want to update. So right here, the first thing we need to do is to actually specify our serializer class. So I'm going to go to our serializers and create that serializer that's specific to updating the status of an order. So I'm going to come right here and say class order status update. So I'm going to call it status update serializer. And then this is going to inherit from serializers. So this is going to be our model serializer. And right after doing this, then what we need is we need only one field, and that's going to be our order status field. So I'm going to basically come and add our field, the order status field. And then this order status field is the field that we're only going to be sending in this request. So I'm going to come right here and going to create a class of meta, and this class of meta is going to have the model. So our model in this case is going to be equal to our order model. And then right after adding our order model, the next thing we're going to basically specify is going to be the fields. So the field is going to be a list of fields, and the only field that we're going to have is our order status. So when I save this, I'm going to go ahead and basically include this. So I'm going to come in our serializers and copy this long name here. So when I go to our views, I'm going to basically come right here and I'll say self. Actually, it's going to be a serializer class. And that serializer class is going to be our serializers.class. And right after doing this thing, what I'll do is to come right here and basically go ahead and be able to basically update our order. So we come right here and say that our order is going to be equal to the order. So we're going to actually use the same get object 0404. I need to come right here and copy this. So we're going to paste it right here. And after doing that, then what we need is to basically use our serializer to update this. So we shall need to access the request data. So actually add data going to be from the request object. So this is going to be add data, and this is going to be request dot data. Then after doing that, then we need to use our serializer. So I'm going to create a variable called a serializer, and this is going to take in our instance. So I'm going to say self.serializer class. So the first thing we're going to need here is going to be our data. So our data is going to be the data, and then the instance of the order model that you want to update is going to be our order. So after doing that, then what you need is to actually check if our serializer is valid. So we're going to say if serializer dot is valid, then we are going to save this. So I'm going to actually say serializer dot save. So we're going to go ahead and basically return our response. So I'm going to come right here where we updated our order. So I'm going to copy that and use that here. So I'm going to go ahead and return also our error. So I'll copy this and basically paste it right here. So hoping that everything is fine. So this is going to be generic API view. We have no issues. So let's go ahead and try to test this. So I'm going to go to our insomnia. And within our insomnia, I'm just going to create a request. And this is going to be for updating and orders status. So this is going to be a put request, and it's going to take in the body as JSON. Then we're going to access this. So right here is going to be our update order status. So I'm going to create a URL for it, and according to our documentation, that's supposed to be on the slash update status, the order ID. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to come here and specify our path. So our path is going to be slash update So update status. Yeah, update status. So it's going to be update status, and then slash the order ID. So we're going to provide the order ID. In this case, it's going to be an integer. It's going to be our order ID. And what we need here is specify our views. So I'm going to copy the name of that view. It's going to be our update order status view as view. This is a class-based view. And then let me remove this for now. So right here, I'm going to give a name. So that name is going to be update order status. So hoping that everything is fine. When I save, I'm going to access this. So I'm going to come right here. So this is going to be a localhost 8000. So it's going to be, so this will be update status, and then slash the ID of the status want to update. So it's going to be, let's say, true. So let's say we wanted to specify. So in this case, I'm going to actually come. So this is going to be our order status. Going to be our order status, and then I'll specify the value as, let's say, so when we get this order, so I'm going to go to my ISO here. When trying to get this order with ID of 2, so we see that it has an order status of delivery. So let's try to update its order status. So let's say want to update this and say that it's in transit. So when we save this and send, so we actually have 404 not found. So let's see. Actually, this seems to be on our orders prefix. So this is going to be, so I'm going to change this. It's going to be on our orders prefix. So it's actually going to be slash orders slash update order status. So when I send this, now have orders update status. So page not found. Let's actually see what's happening here. So it's actually slash update. So it seems like we made an error in our URL. So it's update status. So it's update status. And when I come here and send this, we now have our order status updated for that order with the ID of 2. So let's say we wanted to get the order again. So when I get the order, right now we see that the order status field only has been updated. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the fields we have implemented. So we have the routes, we have getting a user's orders as well as getting a user specific order. So for the slash docs, we shall load this when we are documenting our API with Swagger. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and basically get a user specific order as well as get a user's orders. So what I'm going to do is to create the view. So first thing we're going to do is to create our view. So for that, we're going to create a simple view. So I'm going to come and say class get, actually this is going to be user orders, and then actually let me call it the user orders view, and then it's going to inherit from generics generic API view. So we're going to have the generic API view. And right after doing that, then the first thing we're going to do is specify a serializer class. So we may actually go ahead and just use our order serializer. So we may just basically use our order serializer. So I may actually just use the order detail serializer since it has all the information on the current orders. I'm going to basically copy this. So we need all details about the serializer. So I'm just going to come right here and I'll say that our serializer class, and this is going to be serializers dot, and I'm going to paste that. Then after that, we're going to create a method. It's going to be a get, we're taking self and the request. And now what we want is to get access to the currently logged in user. So let's say the currently logged in user is going to be the user, which is going to be request dot user. After getting the request dot user, we need to get the order specific to that current user. So what we're going to do is to basically use, so we're going to say our orders is going to be equal to, so we're going to query for all orders. So we're going to say order dot objects dot all, and then we're going to filter these orders by the customer. So we're going to say filter by, and then actually we're going to say filter. Sorry for that. We're going to say filter, and then we are going to filter by the customer. If the customer is equal to the user, then we are going to access all orders. So what we need is to actually return a response. We're going to return a response with the data as the serializer data. So we're going to say serializer dot data. And right after doing this, then the next thing we want to do is to actually return the status code. So our status code is going to be equal to status dot http, and this will be 200k. So when I save this, and our server is now reloading. So what we need is to actually attach this to a URL. So we need to go to our docs. So right in here we have the user ID and then the orders. But okay, so we need to actually get the user's ID. So basically we need to access the user's ID. So instead of it saying request.user, then we want to actually specify a user with an ID, and then we go ahead and basically return an order of that user. So I'll change the user query. So this is actually accessing the user from our JWT, but we need to get the user. So I can say the user objects get, then I'll specify the user ID. So in this case, we need the user ID. So I actually specify the user ID in this. So I'll say user ID, and then go ahead and specify that if the PK is equal to, so the PK is the primary key. So if the primary key is equal to the user ID, then we want to return the specific user. So if the user is equal to that, then we want to just return the orders of that user. So what I'm going to do is to save, and when I save, this, we're going to go and test this. So I'll first create the URL for it. So the URL is supposed to be /user/user ID and then the orders. So this is going to be path, and then it's going to be /user, and then it's going to be user, and then we're going to have the user ID, which is going to be an integer. It's going to be int user ID, and then the orders. So it's going to have use. So I'm going to access the view for that, and then simply paste it in here, and then this will be .as view, and then I'll go ahead and give it a name. So I'll say users orders. So I'm going to save this, and then this is going to, so we have no issues right now. So after doing that, what I'm going to do is actually be able to make use of this. So I'm just simply going to come right here and specify. So right here I'm going to say get users orders. So this is going to be a get request, and then I'm going to create this. So I'll come and specify the URL. So our URL is going to be user ID, and then the order. So let's say host /8000, and then slash, this is going to be our orders slash, and in this case I'm going to say user, and then slash the user ID. So in this case it's going to be, let's say 1, and then the orders. So it's going to be orders. So when I send this, so our user is not defined. I actually forgot to import that. So I'm going to import our user model. So I'm going to make use of Django's get user model method. So actually what I'll do is say from Django.contrib, we are going to import our get user model. And this is happening because we have this setting. So when I go to settings.py, we have our auth user model. So when you specify this, then you can be able to use our get user model. So then what I'm going to do is specify that our user model. So I'll say user is going to be equal to the result of calling the get user model method. So I'm going to save this, and once we have that, then I'll try to carry out this again. So hoping that our server is running. So Django.contrib. So this is actually going to be .contrib.auth. So I have saved this. Now you don't have errors. So when I send, orders is non-defined. Okay, so let's try to see. It's actually order.objects.all. So our server is okay. Serializer is non-defined. Alright, so we actually made an error here. We're supposed to specify our serializer. And our serializer is supposed to be self.serializer class. And the instance is going to be equal to our orders. So when I save, I'm going to go ahead and send this. Now, got attribute error. So in this case, we want to return many. So I'll specify many as true. When I save this, I'm going to send. And now we can get the orders for that specific user. So now the next thing we're going to do is to get a specific order of a certain user. So that is located on the /user ID and the order ID. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll say, so I'll create a class here, which is going to be for our user order. So I'm just going to call it user order detail. And then what I'll do is to say that this is going to be generics dot generic API view. So basically call this a generic API view. And right after doing that, then we're also going to use our order details. So I'll just simply copy this line and paste it in here. So right after doing that, then we need to specify a method. It's going to be a get method. It's going to take in self, the user ID, and it's going to also take in the order ID. So right after doing that, actually we forgot to get the request. Since this is a view function, then we need to actually specify that we need to get the user ID, the user. So I'm just going to make use of this query right here. When I get the query, then what you need is to actually specify to get the order with a specific ID and belongs to that customer. So what we need to do in this case is to basically go ahead and get all orders, then get the user's orders, and then filter by the ID. So to do that, I'm going to come and say that our orders is going to be equal to order dot objects dot all, and then what we're going to do is to filter by actually what we need to do is to get the order by ID and to get the order of the customer, to get the orders of the customer, and then get that order with a specific ID. So when I say dot, then I'll say filter, and then I'll specify that you want to filter by if the customer is equal to, so once you filter by if the customer is equal to the user, and then filter by if our order ID is equal to the ID. So I'll say if the primary key is equal to the order ID. So when I save that, Then what we need is to actually just create a serializer. This is going to be self.serializer class. And in this case, what we need is to basically specify the data. So actually, this is going to be the instance. So the instance in this case is going to be our order. And then when we have our order, then what we shall need to do is to return this. So I'm actually going to fix this and just simply come and return our response. And then I'll say that our response is going to take in the data as a serializer data. And then what we shall need to do also is to basically go ahead and specify that our status need to be equal to status dot, this case HTTP 200, and okay, so shall be 200, okay. And right after doing this, then we need to go ahead and do this. So in itself, so right here I got the users state, the users. I'll actually also include the IDs for these orders. So I'll just go ahead to our serializer and then add the IDs. So we need to add the IDs to this. So hoping that everything is fine. Going to restart our server. So when you try to send this, get all the IDs. So let's say I want to get the detail of the user specific order of ID true. So what I'm going to do is to come here and create the request. So it's going to be get users specific order. So I'm going to create this as a get request. I'll create the URL for that. So I'm going to come right in here and I'm going to say path is going to be, so this case we're going to have user slash, in this case we shall have the user ID and then slash order, and then we're going to have the order ID. So in this case we're going to have the integer, which is going to be our order ID, going to be views dot user order detail, and basically I'm going to paste this thing. I'm going to add as view. So right in here, I'll say that the name is going to be equal to user specific detail. So in this case, we have the user specific detail. And what I'll do is to actually save this. Now, when I save this, we're going to basically test this out. So I'm going to go to our insomnia right here. I'll say that it's going to be localhost 8000, and then we specify slash user slash the user ID, which is user ID of 1, going to be user ID of 1 in the order. So let's say we want to access the order of 2. So when I send this, we now see that 404 not found. So this is actually supposed to be on the slash orders prefix. So I go to slash orders. So right now what we did here is to actually let's actually see. When we go back to our views here, we have our instance as order. So this is order.object.all filter that. Things like this is not going to work out. So what we're going to do is to actually make use of this order. So actually say order.objects.get. Actually, what I'll do is to say objects.all to get all orders and filter by that. So filter by the orders. So I'll say filter by those who customer is the user. So I'll say customer is equal to our user. And then right after doing that, it's going to return a list of user or a preset of our users. We need to access that with a specific ID. So um, what we're going to do in this case is to just get that with a specific ID. So I'll just come and say .get, and then this will be the primary key, which is going to be equal to our order ID. So when I say our order ID, then I save this and try to make this request again. Here we are able to access the order with that specific ID of 2. So in this video, we've been able to basically implement most of the routes for creating, reading, and updating orders. Thank you for watching this long video. And if you like this video, please go ahead and leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. And see you in the next video.